A light glowed in the cabin window, the first light Jake Morgan had seen there in 10 years. He got off his horse slowly. Every muscle in his tired body was tight. His gun hung heavy at his side. Out here in Wyoming, 40 miles from town, strangers meant trouble. But when he opened the door, what he saw made his blood freeze. A woman sat in Rose's chair, reading Rose's diary by candlelight. Golden hair fell over her shoulders like wheat in the wind. The same gentle hands that had once touched his face. The same graceful neck that had filled his dreams for 10 years. Rose, the word left his lips like a prayer. She looked up. Those familiar brown eyes met his. But the face was younger, wilder, alive. "I'm Sarah," she whispered. "Rose's sister." Jake's hand moved to his gun without thinking. In that moment, every wall around his heart began to break. 10 years alone. 10 years of faithful mourning. And now this, a ghost made real, sitting in his dead wife's chair. What was a man supposed to do when the past came back wearing a different face? When want and guilt crashed together like thunder in his chest? Wyoming Territory, November 1887. The wind cut through the canyon walls like a knife. It carried the promise of the harsh winter that had killed the cattle business. But Jake Morgan barely felt the cold anymore. Cold had been his friend for 10 long years. He'd been different once, before the winter of 1877 took everything that mattered. Rose Bennett had been 20 when she first got off the train in town. Pure Denver high society, silk dress, pearl earrings, and that way rich girls had of looking at the world like it owed them something. Beautiful. Except Rose looked at Jake Morgan and saw something different. Not the rough rancher with hard hands and sun-worn skin that everyone else saw. She saw hope. "You don't talk much," she had said that first night at the town dance. Her gloved hand rested light as a feather on his arm. "Don't have much worth saying to folks like you," he'd replied, honest as always. Her laugh had been like silver bells. He'd never been good enough for her. "Maybe that's exactly why I want to hear it." 2 months later, she'd shocked Denver society by marrying him. She traded silk for simple cotton, ballrooms for a one-room cabin, fancy lights for oil lamps and the endless Wyoming sky. And for 2 perfect years, she'd been happy. Jake saw it in the way she hummed while cooking breakfast. How she'd run to greet him when he came back from the fields. The letters she wrote to her little sister Sarah, full of joy about this simple life they'd built together. "I never knew happiness could be so quiet," she told him one evening. Her head was on his shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the grasslands gold. Then came the winter that broke everything. The blizzard hit in January of 1877. The temperature dropped to 40 below for 6 weeks. The world disappeared under white death. Rose caught lung sickness in the 3rd week. By the 6th, Jake was digging her grave with his bare hands in the frozen earth behind their cabin. She died whispering his name. Her fever-bright eyes looking right through him at something he couldn't see. Back to the present, November 1887. And now her sister sat in their home, reading Rose's most private thoughts. The likeness was so strong it made his chest hurt. But where Rose had been gentle water, this girl was wildfire. "How did you find me?" he asked finally, putting away his gun. "Rose's letters." Sarah stood, and he saw how the frontier cold had already begun to change her. The soft lines of city living were getting harder, more real. "She wrote about you. About this place. About being happy. Happy." The word tasted bitter. "She died here in that bed, calling for help I couldn't give. She lived here first." Sarah's voice carried an edge Rose's never had. 2 years of living. That's more than most people get. Outside, the wind picked up, shaking the windows. A storm was coming. He could feel it in his bones. And with the nearest town 40 miles away through dangerous canyon country, this girl, this dangerous echo of his past, would be staying the night. Maybe longer. The thought should have scared him. Instead, as he watched her move around Rose's kitchen with natural grace, something deep in his chest began to warm. For the first time in 10 years, something dangerously close to hope. But hope, Jake Morgan was about to learn, could be the most dangerous thing of all. 3 weeks passed like scenes from a fever dream. Sarah couldn't cook to save her life, burned the bacon, oversalted the beans, turned coffee into something that could strip paint. But she tried. Every morning, she tried. She couldn't ride worth a damn either. The first time she helped him check the cattle, she fell off her horse 3 times and nearly got trampled by a scared bull. But she got back up. Every time, she got back up. Rose had been graceful from the start, born to frontier life like she'd been born to breathe. Sarah fought for every skill, earned every callus, won every small victory through pure stubborn will. And God help him, Jake found himself watching her. The way she bit her lower lip when thinking hard. How she'd push loose strands of hair from her face with the back of her hand. The graceful line of her neck when she threw her head back and laughed. She was nothing like Rose. She was everything like Rose. December wind howled like a living thing around the cabin. Jake had gone to town for supplies, leaving Sarah alone. A mistake he'd regret for the rest of his life. He smelled the smoke first. Horse sweat and unwashed bodies. Trouble. 2 men had cornered her in the cabin. Drifters by the look of them, the kind that followed the railroad camps, living off whatever they could steal or take. Through the window, Jake saw Sarah backed against the wall. Rose's old rifle shook in her hands. One man was already inside, moving slow and easy. The other blocked the door. "Easy there, sweetheart," the first one was saying, his voice thick with whiskey and bad plans. "We're just looking for a warm place to spend the night. And maybe some company." "Get out," Sarah's voice was steady, but Jake could see the terror in her stance. "I'll shoot." The man laughed. "You even know how to work that thing?" Jake moved like a shadow, silent. A skill learned from too many nights protecting his herd from wolves, both the 4-legged kind and the worst ones that walked on 2. The first man never heard him coming. Jake's knife found the gap between his ribs before he could cry out. The second turned just in time to meet the barrel of Jake's gun. "Get out," Jake said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet that made smart men listen. "Now." The living drifter took one look at his partner's still form and ran into the night. When the dust settled, Sarah fell into Jake's arms. The rifle clattered to the floor. She was shaking like a leaf in a storm, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she felt small and breakable. "You're safe," he whispered against her hair, breathing in the sweet scent of her. "You're safe now." She looked up at him then, her brown eyes wide and dark in the lamplight. And something shifted between them. Some invisible line crossed. Some dam finally breaking. She was wearing one of Rose's old dresses, the blue one with tiny buttons up the front. Her hair had come loose during the struggle, falling in golden waves around her shoulders. In the flickering firelight, she looked like something from a man's deepest dreams. "Jake," she whispered, and the way she said his name made his entire body go tight with want. His hands found her face, thumbs tracing the delicate line of her jaw. She leaned into his touch like a flower turning toward sun. Her lips parted slightly, and he could see the rapid flutter of her pulse at her throat. The dress had torn during the struggle, showing the smooth curve of her shoulder. His eyes followed that line of bare skin, and she saw where he was looking. Instead of pulling away, she reached up and slowly unfastened another button. Then another. The fabric whispered as it slipped lower, and Jake's breath caught. She was beautiful in ways that made his hands shake, soft curves and pale skin that seemed to glow in the firelight. When she reached for the buttons of his shirt, her fingers trembling with nervousness and need, he didn't stop her. Cotton fell away to show the hard planes of his chest, mapped with scars from 10 years of hard living. She traced one with her fingertip, and the gentle touch sent fire racing through his blood. "Sarah," his voice was rough with warning and want in equal measure. But she was beyond hearing warnings. Her hands moved to his belt, and when their bodies came together, skin against skin, the world outside the cabin stopped existing. They moved toward the bed like sleepwalkers caught in something bigger than choice or right and wrong. Her dress pooled on the floor beside his pants. When she lay back against the pillows, her hair spread like spun gold across the white linen, Jake thought he might die from wanting her. She reached for him, and he was lost. Until his eyes fell on the photograph beside the bed. Rose's wedding portrait. Her gentle smile seemed to look right through him, seeing everything, judging everything. Jake froze. Reality crashed back like ice water. What was he doing? This was Rose's bed. Rose's room. Rose's sister. I can't. He pulled away so fast Sarah gasped. God forgive me, I can't. He grabbed his shirt and ran to the barn, leaving Sarah alone in the rumpled bed, confusion and hurt written across her beautiful face. Outside, the wind had died to whispers. But inside Jake's chest, a different kind of storm was just beginning. Some hungers, once awakened, never sleep again. For 3 days, they moved around each other like wounded animals. Jake threw himself into work, mending fences that didn't need mending, checking cattle that were fine, riding the boundaries of his small spread until his horse was tired and his body ached with tiredness. Anything to avoid the look in Sarah's eyes. She tried to pretend nothing had happened. Made his coffee in the morning, same as always. Cooked his meals, burned them same as always. But the easy talk was gone, replaced by a charged silence that made the cabin feel smaller than a coffin. On the 4th morning, she was gone. No note. No explanation. Just an empty cabin and the sound of wagon wheels fading toward town. Jake stood in the doorway, holding Rose's photograph, the same one that had stopped him from making the biggest mistake of his life. Or maybe it had stopped him from making the only right choice he'd had in 10 years. He couldn't tell anymore. 2 hours later, he was riding hard for town. The train station at town buzzed with the usual chaos of frontier business, cattle buyers, merchants, families heading east or west, chasing dreams or running from nightmares. The afternoon train to Denver sat steaming on the tracks, ready to carry passengers back to the civilized world. Jake saw her right away. Sarah stood on the platform in her traveling dress, the same green wool she'd worn when she first arrived. Her small bag sat at her feet, and she was staring at the train like it was a gallows. She looked so young, so lost. Nothing like the fierce woman who'd faced down armed men with a rifle she barely knew how to use. The conductor called all aboard, and passengers began climbing into the cars. Jake got off his horse and walked toward her, his boots echoing on the wooden platform. She heard him coming. He saw her shoulders tense, but she didn't turn around. Running? He asked. Going home? Her voice was steady, but he could hear the pain underneath. There's a difference. Is there? She finally faced him, and the hurt in her eyes hit him like a physical blow. You made it clear what you think of me. What I am to you. I think you're the most dangerous woman I've ever met, he said, and meant it. I think you could make me forget every promise I ever made, every line I swore I'd never cross. And that scares me. And that's so terrible. For a man like me. Yeah, it is. The train whistle screamed. Last call. Sarah picked up her bag, but her feet didn't move toward the train. She's dead, Jake. Rose's been dead for 10 years. And you've been dead right along with her. Maybe that's how it should be. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of roses in her hair. But is it how Rose would want it? Before he could answer, she was walking toward the train. The conductor helped her up the steps, and she found a seat by the window. Through the glass, their eyes met one last time. The train lurched into motion. Sarah pressed her palm against the window, and for a moment, it looked like she might change her mind, might call out for the train to stop. But she didn't. Jake stood watching until the train disappeared around the bend, carrying her back to Denver and a life that would never include him. Then he rode home to his empty cabin and the ghosts that were waiting for him there. But some ghosts, he was about to learn, refused to stay buried. 2 days of hell, that's what Jake called the time after Sarah left. 48 hours of moving around the cabin like a caged animal, seeing her everywhere he looked. The way she'd hummed while trying to cook. How she'd curl up in Rose's chair with a book in the evenings, firelight dancing across her face. The rumpled bed sheets that still smelled like roses and regret. On the 3rd morning, he found himself getting his horse ready without thinking about it. His body knew what his mind was still fighting. He had to get her back. The ride to town had never seemed longer. Every mile stretched like forever. Every rise in the trail was a new chance for his courage to fail him. What would he say? What could he say? The train station appeared through the midday heat like a dream. Jake's horse was covered in sweat and foam, pushed harder than he'd ever pushed any animal. But as he got off and looked around the platform, his heart nearly stopped. There she was. Sarah stood beside a pile of luggage. Her green traveling dress was replaced by something simpler, a blue cotton dress that looked familiar. Rose's blue dress. The one with the tiny buttons. The one she'd been wearing that night by the fire. She was waiting for the eastbound train, but she was looking west. Looking toward him. Their eyes met across the crowded platform, and the world went quiet. Jake walked toward her slowly, like approaching a wild horse that might run at any sudden movement. Passengers swirled around them, families meeting, lovers saying goodbye, merchants arguing over freight. But none of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the woman standing 20 feet away, watching him with eyes that held equal measures of hope and heartbreak. "I thought you went back to Denver," he said when he was close enough to see the freckles across her nose. "I got as far as the next town," her voice was barely above a whisper. "Couldn't make myself go any further." "Why?" She looked down at her hands, Rose's hands, but stronger somehow, marked now with small calluses from her time on the ranch. "Because I realized something on that train. Rose didn't just write to me about this place. She wrote about you. About the man who could make her laugh with just a look. Who taught her to see beauty in simple things. Who loved her so completely that he'd rather die than betray her memory." The train whistle blew. All aboard for points east. "But she also wrote about something else," Sarah continued, her eyes finding his again. "She wrote about how much she wanted you to be happy. Really happy. Not just existing." Jake felt something crack inside his chest. 10 years of carefully built walls crumbling like dust. "Sarah, don't." She held up her hand. "Don't say anything. Just, if you want me to get on that train, I'll get on that train. If you want me to go back to Denver and marry Thomas Mitchell and disappear from your life forever, I'll do that too." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "But if you want me to come home with you, if you think Rose might forgive us both for choosing to live instead of just remembering, then..." The conductor called final boarding. Passengers hurried toward the train cars. Jake reached out and took her hand. It was warm and real and nothing like a ghost. "Come home," he said, his voice rough with 10 years of unused feeling. "Come home with me." The train pulled away from the station without them. As his horse carried them home across the endless grasslands, their shadows stretched long behind them. Not running from the past anymore, but riding toward whatever future they would build together.